People are joining. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Give everybody a chance to join and we'll get started. Let's see, I've already hit record. I'm sure we'll have more people joining. Welcome to the Texas Action for Healthy Kids School Meals Struggles and Triumphs. We are very excited to have everyone here today. I have a great panel for you, some good information. Logistically, we are recording. You should have received a notice on that. And everyone will be on mute and your videos will be off. But you can listen in with your speakers. You can call in if you have a challenge with audio on your phone. We'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what your organization is. And then there's also a Q&A function, since this is a webinar, where you can drop in your questions so they don't get lost in the chat. Chat is where you can make comments and share who you're with, but the Q&A, we'd like you to drop into there. And we will be sending a copy of the slides that are being used today, as well as any resources that might be mentioned in a follow-up email. So just a little bit about Action for Healthy Kids. Hopefully most of you know us by now. We've been around for 20 years now. We're going on our 21st year. We were created with Dr. David Satcher when he was Surgeon General, and because there was an obesity crisis. There's still an obesity crisis. There's still a need to work on prevention through our schools. And so we are still focused on nutrition, physical activity, and the whole child model to try to help kids make healthier choices, eat more nutritious foods, and be more active. You'll find a lot of great resources on our website. We provide lots of different opportunities for webinars, and there's a lot of tip sheets. We do have grants at the district level. And just a little bit of news from us. We just, like about a week ago, found out that we have been awarded a $47 million grant from USDA, and we'll be working with 200 plus small and or rural school districts to help their meal programs. So we're very excited about this grant and this opportunity to support our school districts in their school meal participation. And there will be more information coming out on that. We are partnering with RMC Health, which does a lot of professional development, and the Chef Ann Foundation. So keep tuned in. If you are a small or rural district, there will be a grant application coming out, and we would love to have you apply. Just quickly, I just want to give you an overview of who's here, and each of our presenters will share a little bit more information about themselves. I'm Michelle Smith. I'm the Senior Field Manager for Action for Healthy Kids, and work with Texas and a couple of other states around, excuse me, school health. We have Sharon Glosson, who is the Executive Director for School Nutrition out of Northeast ISD. Dani, Sheffield, who is a school nutrition consultant now, formerly a Director of School Nutrition. And Patricia Mauser, who is a retired Child Nutrition Director, is our facilitator for this session. And then Michael Rosenberger was able to join us this morning, and he's the Child Nutrition Director for Dallas ISD. So welcome to all of you. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon to share information about Northeast ISD and her work in child nutrition. So I will.
And Sharon, just before we get started, let me reiterate what Michelle said about the Q&A, that we've got a pretty short time frame for each of our three panelists. And so as you think of questions as they're going through their presentation, please put that in the Q&A, because we really do want those questions answered. Or if you have comments, in regard to what they're discussing, please put that in as well. All
Okay.
right, Sharon.
Thank you all. And it's a pleasure to be here. I am out of Northeast ISD, which is in the San Antonio area of Texas. We have 68 campuses and approximately 60,000 students. We are 50% free and reduced, and half of our sites are on the community eligibility provision, so CEP, as you hear that term. Next slide, please. As we get into the challenges that are continuing since COVID, the first one that came to mind for me was staffing. There's been a huge turnover. I would estimate that about 30% of our staff are new since COVID began. And what that means is they have no concept of what normal was. What was a normal operation pre-COVID? They came into a very abnormal situation with curbside feeding and feeding students at no cost. And so as we go into situations this school year where we're saying, you remember how it was? Go back to normal, go back to the way it used to be. A lot of our employees don't know what that meant, and they aren't able to draw on that experience and that knowledge. So there's a need for extensive training. Even the things that we think are very basic may not be in their knowledge. And so there's a lot of opportunities there because we can do retraining and maybe get rid of some of the negative habits that we had, but it does take a lot of time and energy to do that training. We've also noticed that there are less job hunters, and studies are showing that there are less people in the job marketplace looking for jobs. In fact, one specific group are males, middle-aged males have left the workforce in larger numbers than pre-COVID. And so, although that doesn't affect our demographic as much as maybe your custodial department, we're still seeing an impact of people who have just decided to leave the workforce altogether. We've also struggled within our school district being able to offer competitive wages, even if the budget had the funds available. We're competing with a lot of fast food and retail people that are able to raise their wages very quickly in order to compete for employees, and traditional school district human resources models are not flexible. They may only allow for raises once a year, and they may not allow you to deviate from what other auxiliary positions are paying, such as custodians. They may not allow you to pay more than possibly a teacher assistant position because they don't feel that wouldn't help them with morale in those other positions. And so you can be locked in sometimes to lower wages, and that may make it difficult for you to compete in your community for employees. And also within the school district, because there are vacancies across all positions, we're seeing higher competition within our own schools for employees. And so our employees are being hired in greater numbers for teacher assistant type positions, maybe front office positions. And even though they may be qualified for the position, we didn't see the number of them being interviewed and hired for those positions pre-COVID. And so I think that principals and other hiring managers are looking to our employees more because they have a lack of applicants from the outside. And in our own district, because we have had so much staffing difficulty, we've pulled from within our own administrative positions. All of our central office positions have been rotating through the kitchens over the last 2 years. And so although it's created some great opportunities for cross-training and also for just gaining a better understanding of what really happens in the schools, it has created a strain on those clerical and administrative duties that aren't being done while these people are out working in the kitchens. So we see that in the long term, we think it will be a great benefit that they have that understanding of the impact that their decisions make on the frontline staff and the students. Next slide, please. The other big challenge that we've been dealing with since COVID began and ongoing is supply chain. In my personal experience, it has improved this school year compared to the last 2 school years. And I know that Dana is going to talk more about this in her section of the presentation, but some products are still difficult to source, and especially with equipment, it can be a long wait time once you order the piece of equipment. And so parts to make repairs and replace equipment can be challenging and lengthy wait periods. We know that some of the manufacturers have reduced the number of products that they have available due to challenges with line times and their own labor within their factories. We've seen nationwide some distributors leaving the school business and competition getting less, and that also has an impact on price and the availability of product. And then we've unfortunately seen some of our small local suppliers that went out of business during COVID, or possibly they turned to other types of customers, such as grocery store and other more reliable sources of income. Because as we remember, when we shifted our menu model to curbside, there were a lot of those products that we stopped using because they didn't facilitate a curbside menu model. And so some of our vendors we walked away from for 2 years, and they had to move on, of course. And so we're trying to reestablish those relationships. Next slide, please. The other big change that we're dealing with this year in our school district, we are only half CEP. And so the other half of our school district did return to a meal pricing model. And what that means is that meals were not automatically free for all students starting this school year. And so we had to go back to having families apply for free, reduced price, or paid meals, depending on their individual eligibility. Just educating parents on that process was a challenge and continues to be a challenge. Some families who had very young children had never experienced applying for meals because their students came into the schools during COVID. And so that was a foreign process to them. It's also educating the staff at the schools who would handle those applications. And then your application processor, who may or may not have been doing a lot of applications during COVID. And so getting everybody back up to speed. What we saw was that participation this year did go down. As you can imagine, when you have a meal that is at no cost, there are more students who are willing to participate. When you go to charging for a meal, even at a reduced price, there are some families that may decide to take lunch from home, or they may reduce the number of days that they eat lunch from the cafeteria. We saw a decreased reimbursement because the meals were no longer all reimbursed at the free rate. We had an automatic decrease in our reimbursement because of serving reduced and paid meals. But we also saw a reduction in the reimbursement rate itself from the previous year when we were being reimbursed at the summer meal rate. And then we also had to address the sticky situation of what do we do with students who don't have the funds to pay for meals, but are not approved for free meals. And that was always a very challenging situation for our cashiers, for our staff on the line. And so we really enjoyed having the universal free meal model. But are parents going to be as willing to accept responsibility when they don't pay? Are we going to be able to serve an alternate meal to their child after they hit the maximum charge limit? Is the district going to fund an unlimited charge limit? So there were a lot of questions that hadn't been addressed for a few years. And during that time, you have change in school board members who are ultimately the ones who set those charge policies. And so finding out what their philosophy is about supporting that bad debt every year if you allow meal charges. And then lastly, the community being very concerned about food insecurity for students if they don't have funds for the meals. And in our district, that resulted in some community donations to help pay for meals for students who didn't have the funds. And we're continuing to hopefully gather enough donations to offset to where we don't need to provide an alternate meal for students. Next slide. Oh, yeah. And so fund balance, that sounds like a good thing, but it actually can cause some challenges when your fund balance gets too high. And the fund balance is the excess amount of money to run the program. And so a lot of districts saw an increase in their fund balance at the end of COVID due to a few different factors. I mentioned earlier we had an increased reimbursement rate versus our pre-COVID rate, and so that helped, as well as a higher participation in most cases. And the USDA came through with several grants that helped. Mostly, the largest one was the supply chain assistance grants that we saw to help us buy non-processed food products. And the thing is, we are not allowed, like the rest of the school district, to maintain an unlimited fund balance in case of an emergency. We are limited by the USDA to not have more than 3 months of operating expenses in our fund balance. And so we do risk having non-compliance with the program if our fund balance grows too high. So we have to spend down that fund balance, and it's intended to be invested back into the program. So that means that the school district cannot come and take the fund balance for unallowable expenses. For example, it can't be used to build a new kitchen. It can only be used on specific types of expenses, but that does make it more challenging to reduce the fund balance to the allowable level. It's also risky sometimes to use that fund balance on salaries, which are an ongoing cost that continues to go each year. So we generally try to use the fund balance on capital projects. And as I said earlier, ordering equipment and those types of things is a long wait period right now. So there are challenges to maintaining a fund balance. And so those are the main challenges that as an operator, I'm continuing to see in my own district as well as around the state of Texas. And if you have any questions, again, add them to the Q&A and I'd be happy to address them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. And I just want to quickly add, we are on a short time frame, but these challenges still continue. So not only did they begin 3 years ago, they've kind of evolved a little bit, but they continue. So at this point, I'd like to invite Michael Rosenberger from Dallas ISD to present some of the best practices that he's learned in the North Texas area. We've tried to incorporate some different areas of the state to give you different perspectives. Michael, are you ready?
I am ready, Tricia.
All right, welcome. Please introduce yourself and give us some best practices.
I'll be happy to. Thank you so much, Tricia. And I want to thank Action for Healthy Kids for presenting this webinar and this opportunity. Good morning. I'm Michael Rosenberger, Executive Director, Food and Child Nutrition Services from the Dallas Independent School District. Y'all can see Sharon. She is a superstar. Her presentation was amazing. She hit on the points, and you can see why you should vote for her in the upcoming SNA election. Let's get Sharon voted in. So with that, folks, listen, there's a country star, George Strait. He has a song called Write This Down. So during my presentation, I'm going to cue y'all and I'm going to say, write this down, because I'm going to share some of our best practices that I think are applicable, whether you're in a large urban school district like Dallas ISD, a mid-sized school district, or one of our smaller, more rural school districts. So some answers are universal across all sizes, and that's what I'm going to get into. So Sharon really hit on a lot of the supply chain issues that we're all having. Distributors dropping us as customers, fewer and fewer companies to respond to bids, number of SKUs going down. And yet, paradoxically, at the same time, when we look at trash cans, it seems like food waste is alive and well, right, in schools. And so, okay, write this down, BYO. And that stands for build your own. And we have implemented, especially these past couple years coming back from the pandemic, a number of build your own concepts for students. And honestly, we kind of stole the idea from Chipotle, although there's a lot of those types of restaurants around nowadays where you go in and order away. And so our first build your own is a build your own bowl. And you get your choice of brown rice or whole grain pasta. And then you get your choice of several different proteins. And you have some veggies to add to the bowl. And finally, there's a number of sauces to add to the bowl to flavor it the way you want to. And it's anything from, sriracha or sweet and sour. We have a Korean inspired sauce. And the cool thing about Build Your Own is, when you get involved in deciding what you want, you're more likely to eat it. And so we found that has helped participation. The first pilot that we did with a Build Your Own bowl had an 8% increase in lunch participation, and it was all at the Build Your Own bowl concept. And so since that time, we've expanded Build Your Own incredibly. And what we found is it increases participation, it decreases food waste, and it makes your customers happier. So we even do breakfast now. We do breakfast in a number of ways. Some schools, breakfast in the classroom, some breakfasts are grab and go carts, and some breakfasts we open the cafeteria and do a hot breakfast. And so some of our most popular breakfasts are like build your own biscuit. And here's your biscuit, and you have a variety of toppings, and every student can customize their biscuit the way they want it to. So again, participation goes up, food waste goes down, and customer satisfaction goes through the roof because, your vegetarian students can have a vegetarian biscuit. Your, carnivores can choose what meat they want on top, and etc. So build your own, BYO. There's a ton of different concepts that you can apply this to, but it really helps on your labor. It really helps on your customer satisfaction, really helps on your food cost, decreases food waste. Man, that's a win-win situation for dealing with supply chain issues. And speaking of supply chain, we have no control, right, over what's going to be available and what isn't. That's the climate and the farmers and USDA and manufacturers and such. So what we try to do also is we try to innovate around what we have available. So I'll give an example. So we have a burrito that we have available. Well, we realize that we can serve that burrito in a lot of different ways. We can put a meat sauce on it. We can put a cheese sauce on it. We can put a salsa verde over that burrito. And every single time it's a different taste profile. It's a different appearance. And so, when we get creative about what we have, you can come up with a range of different menu items, even if your real number of choices have decreased significantly. Regarding staffing, okay, write this down. Here's a cue. School counselors School counselors should be your best friend when you are looking for employees. Why is that? Because school counselors work with students. School counselors are the first to know when a family has a job loss or there's some kind of economic challenge that the family is facing. And so we have found that partnering with our school counselors is a really positive avenue for finding employees and for getting to potential employees, hopefully before other people get to them. So your school counselors are an invaluable resource when you're looking for employees. The other thing that we do is joint job fairs. We used to do food service only job fairs, and we would have a job fair at a campus or at the building that we're located in, or et cetera. And while we still occasionally do a food service only job fair, we have really partnered with other departments in the district, such as transportation, custodial, grounds, et cetera, et cetera. And we all get together, we all have a table or a booth. And I will say this, from doing job fairs on our own, you get a lot more people coming to a multiple department job fair. And so I really encourage you, reach out to other departments and groups in your district and try to do a joint job fair. You may not get everybody who shows up, but more people total are going to show up, and you'll get your fair share of those people at those job fairs. So those have been some strategies, joint job fairs and school counselors, which have proven to be really, really, really good for us. Sharon covered the lack of pandemic reimbursements. I'll say that our food cost in Dallas this year is the highest it's ever been. And this is with us doing everything we can to reduce food costs. But we're seeing signs that food inflation is starting to go down, and we think this half of the year we're going to see some stabilization and hopefully return to normal. So there are some actionable specific items I think are universally applicable across K-12 food service, from the smallest school districts to the largest. I hope some of these will be very positive and very helpful for you as we go through some exceedingly challenging times. But y'all, it's gonna be okay. All this chaos, it's just life. We're just getting hit with a lot in these past couple of years, but it's gonna be okay. We have kids, they're hungry. We need to feed them. We need to contribute to their health and their ongoing success. So with that, I will conclude my statements. And again, Tricia, thank you so much.
All right, I think I double clicked on unmute and didn't mean to. Excellent points there, Michael, and I did write them down. Build your own, have menu updates that are innovative, toot your own horn, get the word out, and above all, that child nutrition folks are the most creative group of people I have seen in my life. And I, believe it or not, started in child nutrition programs in 1972. So yeah, I've seen a lot of history in child nutrition programs. And this is the first time I've heard the school counselor should be your best friend. I mean, they're already our best friend for a lot of reasons, like special diets and that relationship, but in knowing the family. So thank you for that insight. What I'd like to do is call on Dana. Dana, if you can show us your video while you speak. And Dana has the unique position of having worked in school nutrition programs as an employee, a director for over 30 years. And now in her retirement as a consultant, she has done some training. She has worked for industry. And so she sees both sides of the issue, in particular relating to supply chain issues and the current issues that are still continuing. So Dana, would you share that with us, please?
Thank you, Tricia. I'm happy to do so today. It's hard to imagine anyone on this webinar not being impacted by supply chain challenges. Next. Good morning. I'm Dana Sheffield, and as Tricia said, I'm a former director of school nutrition, spent 30 years in the industry. Have pivoted out of school nutrition a little bit. Now I'm a consultant for school districts and also in sales for Cool Tropics. Next. The supply chain has a path, and today we're going to look at that path and how it begins and how it ends up in the schools and with students. Next. Materials. For industry, materials have been a huge challenge, both for food and for non-food. And Sharon mentioned earlier equipment. That is also a big area. Whether it be ingredients to produce a food, raw products to make a particular product, having crops to make ingredients and products. All of these have impacted industry, and of course, that has ultimately impacted school nutrition programs. I'm reminded of a story a colleague shared about blueberries. She said that it took them 6 months to get ample blueberries to make muffins that they sell to school nutrition programs. So this is just one example. And Michael referred to the shortages and not knowing what school nutrition programs are going to receive. Although it has improved, and he did emphasize that, it is still occurring and it is a real issue. Not only do materials affect food, they also affect non-food items, which at one time was as serious or even more serious than having food. For instance, packaging to put foods in. If manufacturers don't have the packaging, then they either can't produce the food or they have to get innovative and choose some other type of packaging or container. Serving components that are used in the schools, such as trays, plates, bowls, utensils to eat with, napkins, straws, all of these were a huge problem because raw materials were not available or could not reach the manufacturer to make the products. Next. The next stop on our path is a major one, and that is manufacturers. The manufacturers that serve the school nutrition programs are part of a huge food service industry. Manufacturers who serve school nutrition programs are merely just one segment of the giant industry. But the difference is foods and even non-foods have really strict regulations and requirements in school nutrition programs under the authority of USDA. So it's not as easy to make products for school nutrition as it is for restaurants, retail, grocery stores, and some of the other segments of the food service industry. It is timely to even get approved for industry to make products. Also, just as the workforce has been a major issue in school nutrition programs, it's also been a major issue in the manufacturer world as well. People not returning to work, not having an adequate workforce to make all of the necessary products, to run machinery on lines to make adequate products. Next. The next item on our path is transporting that food and those non-food items. If it's made by the manufacturer, it has to be transported. And it's transported either to the schools or to a distributor, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. The transporting takes place not only cross-country, but it takes place intercontinental as well. And I know we all have visions of those metal containers floating on barges, you know, in the ocean near huge ports of cities. That is real. It was real, and it's still real to a certain extent. Transporting is expensive, and we all know that fuel costs increased over the last couple of years. So it cost more to transport foods and non-foods to reach school nutrition. Lead times, that is the time that a manufacturer needs to produce a product, increased. And not only did the lead times increase, but delivery delays occurred. For instance, if a manufacturer had a delivery time of 3 to 4 weeks to a school nutrition program or even into a distributor, that delay or that lead time increased to 6 to 8 weeks and beyond. So transporting is a real challenge. Next. Most of the time, the food and non-food items are transported to a distributor. The distributor houses food and delivers. They don't really make anything or produce any type of food, but they do store thousands and thousands of products for the entire food service industry, not just school nutrition. The distributor process became really volatile in that it was very hard for distributors in some cases to deliver food to schools in a timely manner. Because remember, they're delivering to the whole food industry. And there were some distributors who made the decision to even leave the school business. Distributors have very tight inventory controls. They cannot stock everything that everyone wants in the entire food industry. There are also very small profit margins for school nutrition business. Even though school nutrition business is vital, it's a small portion of the entire food service industry, and profit margins are not that high. All of these challenges, all of these issues resulted in a lot of substitutions. And of course, you heard Michael and Sharon talk about that, not knowing what was coming on a daily or a weekly basis. Those substitutions were a result of manufacturing, transporting, and just issues in the post-pandemic world that we're living in. Next. And of course, after the distributor, food finally arrives at schools. Most of the time, the distributor is delivering directly to the schools, regardless of the number of schools. So those are stops at every location. If a school district has 8 schools or 80 schools, those are stops that cost money and that need and require staffing and that require transportation and equipment such as their trucks to deliver. Schools saw a lot of substitutions, a lot of out-of-stock products during the time when it was very unstable and manufacturers could not guarantee particular products, which resulted in menu changes for school nutrition programs. If you look on most any school nutrition website, you're going to see an upfront statement that talks about the fact that there are supply chain issues and their menus may have to change at any given time. Some products were out of stock as well because manufacturers were not able to produce everything that they had been in the past. Also, staffing shortages, not only in industry, but as Sharon really focused on, in the schools as well. This also impacts what is made, what is prepared for students, and what schools actually order. Next. And of course, our students. Students need meal security. Both industry and school nutrition have the same passion to serve students. We want students to be successful. We want them to be healthy, and we care about their well-being and their academic success. So they're depending upon industry and school nutrition on a daily basis. Another key item that's been a real challenge is meal participation. Are students eating or not eating? And as I travel to school districts in Texas, the comments and the reality is very interesting. In some school districts, meal participation is really risen, where other school districts say that their participation is down because students are having to pay for meals. Participation also drives what a school nutrition program orders. Therefore, it drives what a manufacturer is going to produce and how much they're going to produce. So in our world, forecasting is hugely vital and important. That's all driven by student participation. And of course, industry wants participation in schools because that's more business. And school nutrition programs want participation as well to operate their own business. But at the end of the day, I think that industry and school nutrition, realize that we are feeding the future. Next. Next. Thank you, Trish. This entire path has led to not only product instability, but price instability as well. We all know that prices are higher. There may be some stability on the horizon, but during the past 2 years, even though there were contracts with school districts for specific prices, some manufacturers had no choice but to raise their prices because of the cost of raw materials, because of lack of staffing, because of cost of transporting food, and on and on. I talked about inconsistent availability earlier. This is something else that drives price instability, not knowing what will be available or what quantities might be available. So we've had to adapt to changes. The school industry and the industry that supplies to the school nutrition programs have really had to adapt, maybe with ingredient changes, with menu changes, with choices of flavors of a product, or just not as many products to menu. Next. And at any given time, we all know that there's a weather issue somewhere in the US and beyond. Weather has a huge impact on the entire food industry. And sometimes it's even paralyzing. Crops are destroyed, people can't get to work, therefore food cannot be produced. We might even see our own shelves empty in the grocery store. At that same time, school nutrition programs are having difficulty as well in knowing that they still have to serve students, but yet due to some type of weather issue, they may not be receiving what they need or in the quantities that they need. Next. And finally, what can be done to survive supply chain disruptions? Well, there are 3 common elements to a circle of trust. Both Michael and Sharon gave wonderful examples of being innovative. What can we do to survive this situation? Industry has had to do the same thing with their part of the business. Good communication and also understanding each other's challenges is an important part of having a good partnership. And then flexibility. Perhaps not receiving items that you wanted, and so you used what you had, as Michael referred to. Everyone had to be flexible including industry. All of these things are important as we think about supply chain disruptions. They're here. We cannot predict when they will go away, even though they have improved. But together, school nutrition and industry can reimagine the path to a better future. Thank you, and I will certainly accept any questions or comments in the chat.
Excellent job, Dana. Thank you. I think you really put a light on the fact that the challenges that the schools have had with supply chain issues are the very same challenges industry partners have had. So, and it's not over. And I'm just really hoping for a period. I think in Michael's presentation, he said something about stabilization. We need to stabilize so that we find out what's normal again, or can get back to some type of normalcy. I'm on a couple of Facebook pages with child nutrition professionals and school nutrition rocks, and anyway, some different pages. And I remember looking about a year ago, and somebody said, okay, quick, my delivery truck just showed up. I've got 10 cases of crushed tomatoes and I've got 40 pounds of macaroni. What do I make? And they're all thinking here, okay, do you have this to add to it, or how can we help you? I mean, thank goodness that we now have electronic communication, because if this had occurred 50 years ago, and like I said, I'm the historian, we were doing phone trees, we were calling our next door district, we were trying to scramble, and we could not have handled this magnitude of change. So my hat's off to the school nutrition folks and our industry partners for, as you said, Dana, the flexibility and the partnership that we all had to share to innovate. One thing I want to point out, because I know we have some folks that are on the Zoom that are not part of school nutrition programs, and I am generally asked the question, well, you know, why is funding an issue for school nutrition programs? It's a USDA program, and or we have the school district budget. And school nutrition programs are a nutrition business. So we have to operate looking at our expenses being within our revenues. And it very much is a profit and loss situation. And if you lose money, your district does have to pay for it, which is not a happy situation. So just so that everybody realizes, the school nutrition department is the only one in the school district not funded by the school district budget. So we rely heavily on USDA funds. And Sharon, when you brought up the changes in funding from the pandemic additional reimbursement to all of a sudden stopping and having people fill out meal applications, you know, if you're on a provision, not to get too specific, but there are a number of provisions allowed that a school district can feed their community universally free, but they have to meet certain criteria. So all of a sudden to go to these families and say, you have to complete an application. Well, I've gotten these meals for free for 2 years. So it's created a lot of instability in our funding, in our participation. One thing that I really would like to address, and I didn't see anything in Q&A, so Michelle, keep me on target if there's something in Q&A. February 6th, USDA came out with a press release that has a new proposed set of regulations. Very personally, I feel like the timing is horrible. We're not stable, but that's me. What I'd like to do is hear from the people that are in the field. That Dana, you said you're talking to different child nutrition folks all the time. And I know Sharon, you and Michael are as well. What are some of the responses that you're hearing? Because we've got a 60-day comment period to respond to USDA that we might be able to massage some of this information. In particular, I'm familiar with some states that state legislatures have assisted in providing local funding for their school districts. some to the extent of universal meals, no payments for all students. So they basically subsidize whatever the USDA doesn't pay for. Some pay for breakfast. Sometimes it's a staggered implementation, a certain cents per meal. So there's everything going on out there in different states except Texas, where we have a $30 billion rainy day fund that I wish we would bring to the light in Texas. But what I'd like to do to begin is hear from you three what your thoughts are on these new proposed regs and how we can respond to make it workable. Who wants to start? Was that a bombshell?
I'll
All right,
start.
Sharon. All right, Sharon, thank you.
Yes, so I think that every stakeholder has to really think about the proposed regulations and what it would mean to their program and their community. And that starts with reading the proposed rules and really digesting it versus just hearing about it from other people.
Good.
So getting the chance to educate yourself. And in our school district, the immediate concerns that we have are based around some of the even further decreases in sodium and what that would mean to some of our student favorite menu options, and also the non-meat options that we pride ourselves on offering daily to a growing number of students who prefer not to eat meat at times or all the time. And a lot of those entrees do have cheese as a component. And so our ability to offer those options to different students with dietary preferences would be more challenging. And then we also are very concerned about restrictions on sugar and what that might mean to milk consumption in our students if we are unable to offer flavored milk to certain grade levels. And our breakfast menu, if we are limited on the number of grain-based dessert, which that's the term for it, but that could mean something like a granola bar or a muffin. And so we have a lot of students that prefer to eat those types of items for breakfast. And so being limited on offering those student favorites would also be very challenging. And I could go on and on, so I'll turn my time over to
Right. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because to your point, when you were talking about non-meat items, as a dietitian, we know that cheese and grain products, milk, some of the most nutritious foods we have are actually nutrient dense, even though they appear to be a little higher in sodium. So do we want to knock out all the other nutrients? Okay, who else?
I'll comment. First, I'll comment for industry. The proposed regulations are going to cause industry to have to take a serious look at their business because their integrity will be on the line. If they have to produce foods with a very restrictive sodium amount, it will not be a food that will contribute to the integrity of their program or of their business.
Right. You're saying the flavor, it wouldn't be
Yes.
the same. Okay, good
Right.
point.
And of course, that product would only be sold to the school nutrition segment.
Right.
So what's going to happen to cost for those foods? They will naturally go up. Even in 2010, when the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act was put into place, there were companies who said, I'll produce the product, but I don't want my name on it. So what does that say?
Volumes.
There may be industry partners who decide to leave the school business, remain in the food industry. So that's very critical. And of course, I can't speak for every manufacturer. Quickly on the school side, being in the business for so long, that's still where my heart and my passion is. School nutrition programs should not be held solely responsible for the total health and well-being of students. They're only at school for a particular amount of time. And so it's like a double-edged sword for school nutrition programs.
Yeah, you make a good point there. In fact, when Sharon mentioned educating yourself, I thought educate the students and educate the families, because what we are being asked to serve the children is completely foreign to what they eat at home and or eating out. And here I go with history, but I can remember in the early 1980s beginning heat and serve foods, chicken nuggets, things like that, chicken fried steak. We had made them from scratch until then. And it's because we had to compete with the competitors out in the competitive market. So I think educating parents, did you see the CDC study that came out in the last week that said for children under 5 years, so this is really before schools get them in most cases, 1/3 do not get a single fruit serving a day. And for the other ones that have the vegetables, 1/2 do not get a single vegetable serving a day. So this is how they're coming to us. They're evidently not in CACFP programs because they're required to get those nutrients if they're following the meal pattern for CACFP programs. So this is telling me the children coming from home to us are needing fruits or vegetables, and I can be honest with you, or milk. I'm concerned about the milk and the flavored milk. And I know I see a couple of Dairy Max folks on. Put something in the chat or in the Q&A if you'd like to chime in, because we had lots of data for years that showed the added sugars were being reduced and that the value of the other nutrients, here we go again with nutrient dense foods. Michael, something to add?
Yeah, thank you, Tricia. I'm going to start with, I think this is the most remarkable document in the Federal Register that I can remember, because Dana, you and I and Tricia have been doing this for a while. I can't think of another time where USDA put in options to select from. They want your input, they want your thoughts. It's really a remarkably written document. And so I'm going to mirror Sharon's comments and say, please read it. I really get the impression that USDA wants voices, they want feedback, positive, negative, everything. So, I recommend everybody get on there, educate yourself, like Sharon said, and then share your comments, positive and negative. I'm not going to reiterate points or anything that's been said, but I will say from a child nutrition perspective, one of the things I love about the new proposed regulations is the alignment of CACFP nutrition regulations with NSLP regulations, because that's been a sore point for a lot of us.
Exactly.
There's different portion sizes and different guidelines, and
you've got two programs.
Yes, and you have like this amazing food, you have a refrigerator full of it, and you can serve it in one program, but you can't in the other, and it's perfectly amazing food. So I really commend USDA for bringing that into alignment. There's a number of groups that are advocating for a single meal pattern across all federally funded child nutrition programs. And, I think this is a step in that direction. You want to help us on the supply chain? Great. Give us one set of rules across all child nutrition programs, and let us use what we are able to get in all programs, and, ease that burden on us. Having said that, I think we look at some of these proposals and we're alarmed and we're concerned. Oh my God, what's going to happen? The most important thing I think is get your comments in. It does matter. And then we'll see on the other side what the final regs are. And then we can start to, once we have something solid, then we can really start to, determine a
Implement, yeah.
pathway.
How
Correct.
to interpret it. And one thing I failed to add is that this is over a multi-year program, that it's not going to be just 1 or 2 years, but up to 10 years.
Yes.
The other thing I need to say is that if you respond, and I know all of you well enough to know that you are, but we need to get the word out to respond, because as you said, every district has their own set of circumstances, but every response is read and recorded. I have read through, what were there, 120,000 back in 2010? There were a bunch, and they are required to record them. So please have your voice heard.
So can you forward me a link that I can send out as a follow-up email?
You mean for the
For
proposed
comment?
regs?
Yeah, for the comments.
Yes, yes,
We'll go ahead and send that out so that everybody has
good. Oh, that'd be
an
great.
easy opportunity to just jump on and do that.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think you covered some much needed information, gave us some ideas of innovation and flexibility, and the fact that our industry partners are right in there with us, that we're all working together to provide the best meals possible.
Thank you, Tricia, for facilitating this wonderful panel. And just real quickly, we do have some additional webinars coming up in the next few months, focusing on school health topics. We have a shack convening in March, as well as a webinar on school nurses. And then we will have an update on what's going on with the legislature in April. Anything that you might need to be paying attention to so that we don't get caught blindsided by the legislature when the session's over. And then outdoor play, Texas Parks and Wildlife will be joining us in May to talk about how important it is for our children to have outdoor play. So,
oh, Michelle, in
you.
our last 5 seconds, I want to thank you, and I want people that are here to know that not only is Michelle our state coordinator for Action for Healthy Kids, but she has also served for years on the Partnership for Healthy Texans, which is a very strong advocate in the state legislature for healthy children. So we want to thank you for that service.
Certainly. And also there are other webinars you can find on YouTube on different topics if you're interested. And then we also will be sharing some information out about our Texas Shack Network. So thank you all for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time and attention, and we appreciate our fabulous speakers taking their time. I know you guys are some of the busiest people I know. So we appreciate
We've got your
you all.
number. We've got your number.
All right.
Thank you
Well,
so
have a
much.
great rest of the week. And we will call it a day.